Imagine living in a world where 98% of the population pays all the taxes, while the wealthy live in luxury without a care. Sounds unfair, right? That's exactly what sparked one of the most explosive revolutions in history, the French Revolution. But what really caused it? Stick around to uncover the shocking reasons that drove an entire nation to rise up against its king. If you're curious about how this changed the world forever, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Before the French Revolution, French society was divided into three groups called estates, and this system was incredibly unfair. The first estate was made up of clergy, the leaders of the church. They controlled a lot of wealth and land but paid almost no taxes. They lived in comfort, away from the struggles of ordinary people. The second estate was the nobility. These were the rich and powerful landowners who held important positions in the government and military. They too enjoyed a life of luxury, barely paying any taxes. Many lived in grand mansions or even palaces, attending lavish parties while the country fell into debt. Now comes the third estate, and this is where the real problem lies. The third estate was everyone else: peasants, workers, farmers, and even some wealthy professionals like lawyers and merchants. This group made up 98% of France's population, yet despite their massive numbers, they had almost no say in how the country was run. They were heavily taxed and struggled just to survive. Most of them couldn't afford basic necessities like bread, and they were furious about how unfairly they were treated. So while the first and second estates lived in luxury, the third estate was crushed under heavy taxes, food shortages, and rising prices. Even though the third estate did all the work that kept the country running, they were ignored and mistreated by the government. And as you can imagine, resentment was growing. Let's talk about the economic mess that France was in before the revolution. Imagine a country drowning in debt, with people barely able to afford food. That's the France of the late 1700s. It all started because France had spent way too much money fighting wars. They supported the American Revolution to help the colonies break free from Britain, which sounded like a great idea at the time. But wars are expensive, and this one drained France's finances. On top of that, the French government was already in debt from earlier conflicts, and they were borrowing huge amounts of money just to keep the country going. So, how did the government try to fix this? By raising taxes even higher. But that only made things worse. The more they tried to squeeze out of the third estate, the angrier people got. The economic hardship in France was more than just a financial crisis, it was a human crisis. People were starving, angry, and desperate for change. The combination of crushing debt, reckless spending by the king, and the rising cost of living created a boiling point. The government seemed helpless to solve these problems, and the people were losing hope. Another big factor behind the French Revolution was the weak leadership of King Louis XVI. At a time when France desperately needed strong and decisive action, King Louis was seen as indecisive, disconnected, and overwhelmed by the problems his country faced. It becomes clear that the French Revolution didn't just happen because of one cause. It was the result of many forces coming together in a perfect storm. The old system of society, known as the old regime, was deeply unfair, with the common people shouldering the burden of taxes and poverty, while the nobility and clergy lived in luxury. The country's financial crisis, with its crushing debt and economic hardship, left the people hungry and desperate. At the same time, the weak leadership of King Louis XVI made things worse as he failed to respond to the growing unrest and chaos. In the end, the French Revolution was much more than just a political event. It was a revolution of ideas, a revolution of society, and a revolution of the human spirit. It showed that when people come together to demand change, they can achieve the impossible. It was a perfect storm, and once it began, there was no turning back.